You guys have joined 10 Best Practices for Manufacturers. I'm here with John Kuda today. He's our head of PLM and Value Engineering. We'll be starting real shortly here. I did want to jump in with a couple of quick housekeeping items. One, next week, we are off for Thanksgiving. We hope you all have a wonderful time with your families and spend it in a nice way. The following week, we come back doing AutoCAD Plant 3D. This is with Quentin. He's awesome and is going to show you ACC collaboration on your projects. The following week, I know it's going to be a simulation session. We're trying to hammer down exactly what that's going to be. So that right now is marked as TBD. And then on December 19th, we're looking at, can shared drives handle PDM? So we're going to look at the challenges, maybe even how you can do that if you're so inclined, but also some alternatives like Vault and other proper PDM systems. So you might want to look at that if you're still living in a shared drive or a OneDrive or a box world. Lastly, I do want to promote, we just came out with this great resource. I did an interview with John about it. It's the Product Lifecycle Management white paper from Harvard Business Review on Autodesk. It's a really great read about, how having, this thread of data through your organization can be super transformative to your manufacturing processes. So please grab that QR code and take a look. Other than that, though, I think that's all I had to share today. I once again want to thank everybody for coming. Just a reminder that we are off next week. So we'll commence the following week. But without further ado, I did want to introduce you to John. He'll introduce himself, and we'll get going on this week's KVA, where we discuss the 10 best practices for manufacturers. Take it away, John.
Good morning. Thank you for joining. My name's John Kuda, and I'm the head of PLM and Value Engineering here at KETIV. Today, I'm going to spend a few minutes and talk to you about 10 best practices for manufacturers. So I've been in the PLM industry now probably more years than I'd like to remember. But over the years, I've come to realize that a lot of manufacturers are really not taking advantage of the technologies that are available today to help improve their business. Someone a lot wiser than me once said that PLM is 1,000 things to 1,000 people. And I believe that to be true. But today, let's just focus on 10 practical best practices that you can use to improve your business. So why do best practices matter? I mean, why do you care about best practices in improving your business? Well, it's really all about maximizing the productivity of your knowledge workers. And what we've found is that a lot of times you're spending the majority of your time on what we would consider to be non-value-added activities. Things like searching for information, duplication of effort, rework, fixing errors. All these things don't add value to your organization. And that's time you could be spending on value-added work. So what's the result of this? Well, reduce costs, reducing scrap, rework, warranty expense, reducing material costs and risk of supply disruptions in your business. Or increase revenue, accelerating products to market, bringing better products to market faster, and increasing the value that you're providing to your customers. So by reducing the non-value-added activities and making your value-added work more effective, you can reduce cost and increase the revenues, thereby increasing profitability. So let's get into it. I've broken up the 10 best practices into two categories: product design and product lifecycle management. Product design includes 5 best practices, and I'm not going to read all of these here. We're going to go into each one in a bit of detail. And then product lifecycle management on the other side is another 5. Now, there, of course, are many more best practices on each of these categories: product design, product lifecycle management, but we only have time to focus on the top 5. So let's get into it. Product configuration, design, and manufacturing best practices. So let's start with customers wanting to get an order, wanting a quote for a particular configuration of your product. So whether you're configured to order or engineered to order, a lot of times you're dealing with a quote process that is serial, lots of manual interaction, non-standard processes, communications through email, spreadsheets, attachments. And at the end of the day, there's heavy engineering involvement, and each quote basically needs to be validated for a proper configuration, brought back to the sales team to communicate back to the customer. And this loop actually is very time consuming and frustrating to the customer. Customers, especially in e-commerce, the age in which we live, they've come to expect a lot more of a seamless process. And those tools do exist. So our more advanced customers are utilizing a CPQ tool to actually do self-service customer quoting. Now, the quote tools that are available, and there are many, we would highly recommend that you use one that is constraint-based. So as the customer is building out their configuration, they are constantly offered the possible choices they can go next in order to build a valid configuration. We think that the CPQ, the customer portal, needs to be fully integrated to your downstream systems, especially ERP, so they can get real-time pricing and availability, as well as PLMs, so that the configuration actually can be managed as a BOM. The second best practice I'd like to discuss is isolated design silos. So, this is where you've got teams throughout the globe or throughout the country that have their own set of design tools that don't communicate with others. So the knowledge that's learned and the best practices, if you will, that are followed by each of these teams are not shared with the rest of the organization. So clearly, what is more productive is to combine these efforts into a global design system where all of these global teams are collaborating on the best ideas, exploring more design concepts, sharing knowledge, so they can create better products with fewer delays. The next typical practice is where you have a serial design to manufacturing release process. So there are a series of prototype stages, pilot stages that are needed in order to complete the design to be handed off to manufacturing and released. And a lot of times, these handoffs between design and manufacturing are very long and involved, and frankly, waste a lot of time and introduce the possibility, or should I say probability, of errors happening in between. And so what we recommend is allowing your design and manufacturing teams to work together by integrating the CAD tools or the engineering tools with the downstream manufacturing automation tools, so that prototypes can actually be made quickly and easily directly from the design tools. Now, what does this do? Well, it allows you to spend more time on creating better products and reducing time to market. Related to that is, again, you have multiple prototyping stages required to perfect a product so that it can be released to manufacturing. And this adds time and effort to the cycle. Our customers now are using integrated design simulation tools to actually shortcut this process, and really integrating design and simulation in a rapid iteration process that allows you to take the results of your simulation, bring them back into your design, and quickly iterate the design so that when it is time to build a prototype, you're basically almost there, and fine-tuning based on the physical characteristics of the product rather than some of the easier things that you can do. So the results of that is better products. You can evaluate more options to essentially introduce the product that is best from all of the options available. And you have, again, reduced time to market. That's a key theme of best practices, because you're reducing the time it takes for the handoffs, correcting the errors, the rework, all of the mistakes that you're introducing into the process because of these manual handoffs. Now let's talk about something that's really near and dear to my heart, which is part duplication. Most companies don't even realize they have a problem, because it's easier to create a new part than it is to find and reuse an existing one. So what we found is that a lot of times there is multiple duplication of either exact matches or near matches in your organization. Of course, there is a lot of cost involved with carrying a part. You need to buy and build inventory. You need to manage that part. And, for all of these parts, if you can reduce the number, you can actually save a lot of money. So how do we do that? Well, we can classify and standardize part descriptions and the attributes that build those descriptions, that enable fast search and allow you to compare parts that may be similar in characteristics. And then, of course, reuse parts that have the proper characteristics that you're looking for, and eliminate that redundant effort involved in creating new parts. Ton of value in preferred part and design reuse. All right, now let's move on to product lifecycle management. So the best practices that I talked about earlier are really involved in that manufacturing release process and design. So design to prototyping to pilot to release. But what do you do after the product's released? So that's product lifecycle management. That's really involving all of the downstream functions so that everybody is collaborating on a single source of truth of product information, so that everybody's on the same page and aware of changes that are pending, changes that have occurred, and how to implement those changes. The first PLM best practice I'd like to share: early decisions have consequences. So I'm sure you've seen this chart 1,000 times before, but it is as relevant today as it was 20 years ago. In fact, most of product costs are fixed very early in the design cycle, 70%, some say higher, 80%. And the cost to actually make a change after a product is released is actually 10, 100, or even 1,000 times greater once the product has been released or in fact in the field. So what you want to do is find the problems early, catch them, and make those changes very early in the design cycle. But a lot of times, companies basically work in silos so that engineering designs in isolation without any input from the downstream functions that basically have to use that design to build the actual product. So what is the result of that? Well, high total change costs. You have problems that are found after release that need to be fixed, that are actually a lot more expensive to fix than they would have been if you caught them earlier in the design. It's as simple as that. Now, that can be quality issues, it can be supply chain issues, manufacturability. There are a ton of factors that need to go into the design that aren't really about the functionality of the product as much as they are about how it's sourced, how it's built, and some of the practices that are used to design for quality and serviceability. So what we recommend is getting the functions, the downstream functions, involved in that design process as early as possible and collaborate in an effective way so that their knowledge can be input into the design cycle, so you can design for cost and supply, design for manufacturability, design for serviceability, all the things that you need to make sure that you have fewer changes late in the process. The next thing we see a lot of times, and I'm sure many companies are facing this in many ways, is, frankly, each function has their own information silo, and there isn't a lot of integration between these silos. So everyone's working in isolation. Product data, drawings, et cetera, are stored in multiple locations. Hard to find how to know if it's the latest release version or is it an outdated version. You don't know because it's just stored in a local drive. Clearly, it makes sense to have all that information stored in a central repository, creating a single source of truth for product information. So everybody's on the same page and knows what the latest version of the product or drawing is. Of course, you'd want to connect this information with all of the downstream systems that make use of product information, whether that be ERP, CRM, service information. All of these systems need to be synchronized on a single source of truth of product information. And these blue arrows really illustrate the fact that you don't want to create more silos. You want to connect all of your information sources so that everybody's looking at the same single source of truth. So now let's talk about quality management. Many times you can have the best quality system, but if it's in isolation, it's really not helping you design better products. And so a lot of times what you'll have is a situation where the customer provides a complaint or an issue, they return some material, there's a warranty request or an RMA process involved in that. That leads to a non-conformance, an FMEA, you want to find the root cause of that analysis, of that defect, and then a CAPA to correct and prevent that problem from occurring again. But then it stops. So it's basically trapped in the quality system and not shared with the team that needs to correct the problem. So clearly it makes sense to close that loop and have that CAPA information directly integrated with a change request that turns into a change order that actually leads to a product change process that corrects the problem. And so this closed loop can be followed again and again, and basically ensuring that the issue that you think you've identified has been resolved and tracked through an engineering change order. The next typical practice I see over and over again is companies basically doing processes in whatever manner they've done it before, or very, person dependent. Everybody does it a little bit differently. And that doesn't make any sense because the processes are very hard to really predict, know where things are in that process, and then find out where you're actually having bottlenecks and delays. It's hard to know because you don't have a process that you're following. You're basically tracking the thread of emails, with attachments and whatnot. And that information is basically point to point and not really being tracked in a methodical fashion. So for all of those processes, if you can standardize a workflow in a predictable way, it allows you to involve both internal and external participants. What I mean by that is external folks are like customers, perhaps, and suppliers in an integrated workflow that allows you to track a process where it is in terms of completion, and then continuously monitor that process for opportunities for improvement in performance, and allows you to have visibility as to where things are in the span of that process. Take the change order process, for example. If you don't have a standardized way for conducting changes that involves visibility to downstream functions, if it's just being done via email or via conversations, you're not tracking that change. That's a recipe for disaster. So another situation that occurs a lot of times in organizations where they have multiple product introductions or projects, you can read that as projects, being introduced or performed at the same time, there is a lack of consistency in the way that these projects or product introduction processes are executed. So a lack of governance, visibility to the bottlenecks that are causing delays results in basically compromises and misalignment of the resources so that the resources are not really being placed on the most promising ideas, but basically just going in the direction that they started. Resources are assigned to a project, they basically are led to the completion. So if you had a way of standardizing the new product introduction process, so each program, and that could be projects as well, have standardized milestones that need to be met so that projects are comparable, then you can actually take a look at the projects that are most promising and the ones that are perhaps delayed and not as attractive, and assign those resources on the ones that are, speed those to market, and actually optimize your resources to focus on the best opportunities. So I know I've gone through these really quickly. And clearly, every company has a different set of issues or different set of processes that could use maturity. So how do I go about identifying which of these best practices really are applicable to my business? Well, you have a set of desired outcomes or a set of challenges that you're facing. And at KETIV, we have best practices that are enabled through our solutions. And so we have a process to actually understand an alignment where we can prioritize your desired outcomes or challenges, if you will, with best practices so that we can identify which best practices provide the most value. So how do we do that? Well, we have a process. We have a process called Business Process Assessment, BPA for short. That is a way that we can step through identifying which processes can be improved, which best practices would you benefit most from, and then identifying the value of that solution to your business or set of solutions to your business. So there's a set of inputs or a discovery phase followed by an analysis phase. And then finally, we will present a summary of findings that includes a solution summary or roadmap of what you should follow, some of the assumptions we use to model value, and then what that value turns out to be. Why is it important for you to invest? And so we'll provide a set of conservative financial assumptions that make it really a great investment idea. So I'm going to pause here now and basically they're in the chat window. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat now and I will get to them as soon as I possibly can. So for now, I'd like to say goodbye and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Let me go ahead and share my screen once more. Yeah, I really appreciate you walking through all that with our audience. Yeah, and if you do have any questions, we have the Q&A panel open. So please throw them in there. Since we're at the end of our time, I am going to share those with John offline and we can get those answered at your convenience. We'll just send them back to you. We have all your email addresses as a result of being on the webinar. So just a quick reminder again, we were off next week for Thanksgiving. And then join us again with Quentin when he talks about AutoCAD Plan 3D. I've already seen a couple of downloads on the product lifecycle management download, so come grab it, and it's free and very informative. And then we've got a blog also on our website where we interviewed John about it. So go check it out. Thanks again, everybody, for your time today, and enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.